Right now, someone is pulling your strings, and you have no idea it's happening. Every single day, you make choices you believe are your own. You say yes when you wanted to say no. You feel guilty for things that aren't your fault. You question your own reality. And here's what's terrifying. This is not accidental. There are people in your life, maybe someone you love, maybe your boss, maybe even a friend, who have mastered the invisible art of bending your will without you ever noticing. As the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once observed, man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Today, we're going to expose the psychological machinery behind manipulation, the tactics, the patterns, the subtle phrases that rewire your brain. By the end of this video, you'll never see your relationships the same way again. Your eyes will open. Invisible. Manipulation is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's not the villain twirling his mustache in the corner. No, real manipulation is a whisper so soft you mistake it for your own thoughts. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling confused, drained, somehow wrong, but you couldn't explain why? Have you ever apologized for something that wasn't your fault just to keep the peace? That feeling has a name. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable tension when your reality doesn't match what someone is telling you is real. The manipulator's greatest weapon isn't force, it's confusion. They create a fog in your mind where you can no longer trust your own perceptions. Dr. George Simon, who spent decades studying covert aggression, explains that manipulators don't want you to see them as the problem. They want you to see yourself as the problem. They know what buttons to push, how to exploit our vulnerabilities, and how to turn our consciences against us. And this is just the surface. Because manipulation has a structure, a blueprint that repeats across every toxic relationship. But to understand it, we first need to examine where it all begins. Love. It starts with magic. They make you feel like the center of the universe. The texts never stop. The compliments overflow. They remember every detail you mentioned. You think to yourself, finally, someone who truly sees me. But here's what you don't realize. This isn't love, it's strategy. Psychologists call this love bombing, an overwhelming flood of affection designed to create instant attachment. It triggers dopamine in your brain, the same chemical released by addictive substances. You become neurologically bonded before you even know who this person really is. Think about it. Have you ever felt like a relationship moved too fast, like someone was too perfect too soon? That uncomfortable feeling in your gut wasn't paranoia. It was your subconscious detecting a pattern that didn't make sense. As clinical psychologist Ramani Durvasula warns, love bombing is not romance. It is a tactic designed to create dependency. The manipulator isn't interested in building something real. They are installing hooks into your psyche. Because once you're addicted to that high, once you believe you've found something rare and precious, that's when the real game begins. And what comes next is where the darkness truly reveals itself. Slow erosion. After the love bombing comes the shift. It's never dramatic, never obvious. One day they make a small criticism. Your laugh is too loud, your friends are a bad influence, that shirt doesn't look good on you. You brush it off. Everyone has opinions, right? But these comments don't stop. They accumulate. Drop by drop, like water carving through stone, they begin to reshape how you see yourself. Your confidence fades slowly. This is intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological principle that makes gambling addictive. Sometimes they're warm and loving. Sometimes they're cold and critical. You never know which version you'll get, so you work harder. You change yourself. You shrink to fit their expectations. Have you ever looked back at a relationship and barely recognized the person you had become? Have you ever lost friends, hobbies, dreams because someone convinced you they weren't important? The manipulator doesn't break you in one blow. They do it through 1,000 tiny cuts, so gradual you don't notice you're bleeding until you've lost yourself entirely. As the saying goes in psychology, the frog doesn't jump out of slowly boiling water, but there's a specific technique they use to accelerate this erosion. One that attacks the very foundation of your sanity. Gaslighting. That never happened. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. These phrases might seem harmless, but they are weapons of psychological warfare. Welcome to gaslighting, perhaps the most insidious form of manipulation that exists. The term comes from a 1944 film where a husband systematically manipulates his wife into believing she's going insane. He dims the gas lights and denies it's happening. She sees the change. He tells her she's crazy. Eventually, she believes him. This is what gaslighting does to your brain. It attacks your epistemology, your ability to know what is true. When someone consistently denies your lived experience, something terrifying happens. You start to doubt yourself more than you doubt them. Reality becomes negotiable. Neuroscience shows that chronic gaslighting actually changes brain function. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and self-trust, becomes impaired. You become dependent on your abuser to tell you what's real. As psychoanalyst Robin Stern explains, gaslighting can happen to anyone, and it can be devastating because it erodes your sense of reality. But gaslighting rarely works alone. It usually comes paired with another technique that keeps you trapped in the cycle, and this next tactic might be the most painful to recognize. Guilt machine. After everything I've done for you, I sacrificed so much, and this is how you repay me. If you really loved me, you wouldn't do that. Do these phrases sound familiar? This is guilt manipulation, the art of weaponizing your conscience against you. The manipulator positions themselves as the perpetual victim. No matter what happens, no matter who is objectively at fault, somehow you end up apologizing. Your empathy becomes your prison. Here's what's devastating about this tactic. It specifically targets good people. If you have a strong conscience, if you genuinely care about others, you're the perfect target. Your own morality becomes the chain that binds you. Have you ever stayed in a relationship out of guilt? Have you ever done things you didn't want to do because refusing would make you the bad guy? The manipulator creates an emotional debt that can never be repaid. Every conversation becomes a courtroom where you're always on trial. As philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre observed about human relationships, hell is other people. And for the victim of guilt manipulation, this becomes literal truth. But the guilt machine is just one part of a larger system. There's another technique that works in tandem with it, one that isolates you from everyone who could help. Isolation game. They don't like your best friend. Your family is toxic, they say. Your coworkers don't understand you like they do. Slowly, methodically, the manipulator cuts you off from your support system. This isn't coincidence, it's strategy. A person with strong connections is hard to control. A person alone is vulnerable. The isolation often feels like love at first. I just want us to spend more time together. Your friends are a bad influence on you. I'm the only one who really gets you. But underneath these words is a calculated removal of everyone who might tell you the truth about what's happening. Alone you can't escape. Studies on cult psychology reveal the same pattern. The first step of indoctrination is always separation from outside influence. The manipulator becomes your only source of reality, your only mirror through which you see yourself. As social psychologist Robert Cialdini documented, social proof determines so much of what we believe to be true. When the manipulator is your only social contact, their version of truth becomes absolute. You lose the comparative perspective that healthy relationships provide. But isolation serves another purpose too. It sets the stage for one of the most psychologically damaging tactics of all, moving target. Nothing you do is ever good enough. You changed the behavior they complained about, but now something else is wrong. You met their demands, but the demands have shifted. Welcome to moving the goalposts, a manipulation technique that ensures you're always chasing approval you'll never receive. The finish line keeps moving. The psychological effect is devastating. You internalize the message that you are fundamentally flawed. Not that you made a mistake, but that you are a mistake. No amount of effort, sacrifice, or change will ever be sufficient. Have you ever worked tirelessly to please someone only to feel like you're running on a treadmill? Have you ever achieved something they asked for, only to be met with criticism about something else? This creates a state psychologists call learned helplessness. When nothing you do makes a difference, you eventually stop trying. You become passive, compliant, controllable. As Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, observed about human psychology, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But the manipulator doesn't want you to change. They want you exhausted and defeated. And they have one more weapon in their arsenal that keeps you bonded to the pain: trauma. Here's the part that makes people feel crazy. Despite everything, despite the pain and confusion, you can't leave. You love them. You miss them when they're gone. You make excuses for their behavior. This isn't weakness. It's neurobiology. It's called trauma bonding, and it's one of the most powerful psychological chains that exist. The cycle of abuse and reconciliation creates an addictive pattern in your brain. The relief you feel when the abuse stops, when they are kind again, that relief triggers an enormous dopamine release. Pain creates attachment. Research shows that intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable rewards mixed with punishment, creates stronger bonds than consistent kindness ever could. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty is the hook. Have you ever wondered why you kept going back to someone who hurt you? Have you ever loved someone and hated yourself for loving them? As attachment researcher Dr. Patrick Carnes explains, trauma bonds are difficult to break because they are rooted in survival instincts, not logic. Your brain literally becomes wired for the dysfunction. Breaking free requires more than willpower. But understanding this mechanism is the first step toward liberation. And that brings us to the most important question of all: breaking chains. So how do you escape? How do you break patterns that are literally encoded in your neural pathways? The first step is awareness. Everything we've discussed today, the love bombing, gaslighting, guilt, isolation, moving goalposts, trauma bonding, these tactics only work in darkness. When you can name what's happening, you begin to reclaim your power. Awareness is the first freedom. Start trusting your feelings again. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your intuition isn't broken, it's been suppressed. Rebuild your connections. Reach out to the friends and family you've been isolated from. Their perspective is medicine. Establish boundaries. This is where manipulation dies. The manipulator's power depends entirely on your compliance. When you start saying no, when you stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault, their control evaporates. As psychologist Henry Cloud writes about the power of limits, boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not me. Consider therapy. Trauma bonds don't break easily. A professional can help you rewire the patterns. And most importantly, understand this truth. The manipulation was never about your flaws. It was about their need for control. But recognizing these patterns in others is only half the journey. Mirror truth. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to discuss. Sometimes we manipulate too, not with malicious intent, not consciously, but we all have moments where we guilt trip, where we withhold affection to get our way, where we twist words to win arguments. As Carl Jung powerfully stated, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The same awareness that protects you from manipulation can transform you into someone who never uses these tactics on others. The victim can become the healer. Ask yourself honestly, do you use guilt to get what you want? Do you punish people with silence? Do you tell partial truths to control narratives? This isn't about shame, it's about evolution. When you understand the psychology of manipulation deeply, you gain the power to choose differently, to communicate directly, to express needs without games, to love without control. The manipulator operates from fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of losing control. When you heal your own fears, you become immune to manipulation and incapable of inflicting it. This is the ultimate freedom, not just escaping manipulation, but transcending the entire dynamic. You've now seen behind the curtain. The tactics that once operated invisibly in your life have been exposed. Love bombing, gaslighting, guilt manipulation, isolation, moving goalposts, trauma bonding. These are not mysteries anymore. They're patterns you can recognize, name, and resist. Knowledge is your armor. But remember, this knowledge isn't just for protection. It's for transformation. Every relationship in your life can become healthier when you refuse to participate in manipulation, whether as victim or perpetrator. As the philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote 2,000 years ago, wisdom that still illuminates our path today. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Choose sanity, choose clarity, choose relationships built on honesty rather than control. The chains are only as strong as your unawareness of them. And now, you are finally awake. If this opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Subscribe for more psychology that transforms how you see the world.